Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts Podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Meaningful Hearts Podcast. Last episode, Drew was solo. This episode, I am solo. And I think him and I have been doing more solo episodes recently. And as a human being, one of the things that came to mind was, I wonder if people think that maybe we're just not getting along as much as we used to, or if there's turmoil in the relationship. Because I know that in social media, sometimes when couples are either arguing or they're just not in a good place, social media tends to know about it. Well, that is not the case. I think the quite opposite. Drew and I just happen to be on different schedules. And sometimes that entails compromising and trying to be there for each other in different ways. And so this is one of the ways that we manage to show up not just for each other, but also for our listeners, in case anybody was wondering. Now, what I'd like to talk about today is chips. And I don't mean potato chips. Haha, yes. So corny, Daniela. I make myself laugh, and that's all that really matters. But I would like to talk about chips on our shoulders and do a little reflection of what this might mean. So I did some research. It was actually very interesting. First, let me, define what it means to have a chip on your shoulder. So it is essentially a belief that you've been underestimated, passed over, undervalued, or rejected unfairly in some way, shape, or form. And what this does is that it makes you hold a grudge. And as a result, this perceived slight that you've experienced now creates a desire to either prove value or that you're not somebody to be messed with, or other maladaptive behaviors. When I was doing some research into where this actually came from, it actually started in 19th century America. And it started as a practice in bar rooms where men would put an actual piece of wood on their shoulder to indicate they were looking for a fight. They would then dare others to knock the chip off. And I mean, as men in a bar would, I would not expect them to say no to a dare like that. And so this is where the phrase actually originated from, which I didn't know. And I just thought it was very interesting, the actual meaning or origin of the phrase. But in any case, I think it's important for us to reflect on what chips we carry on our shoulders, if we carry any, and how we carry them. I used to have a really hard time with people who I could tell walked around with a chip on their shoulder. And if any of you might be perceiving me as wrong in this instance, then feel free to challenge me on it. But from my experience, the people who walk around with chips on their shoulders are people who tend to be very reactive. People who have RBFs, resting bitch faces, who are in a constant state of that person is out to get me, who are just ready to throw down at any given moment. But people with chips on their shoulders can also be somebody like myself in a different way. There are chips that I carry where I just tend to shut down as a result, and I'm a little bit more to myself. I know one of the biggest chips that I carry on my shoulder is trying to figure out how to work through the resentment that I feel for the people that I love and care about in my life. I think we all have chips on our shoulders in some way, shape, or form, but it's how we handle those chips that ends up being, I guess, the defining factor of, or I guess one of the defining factors of who we are. I used to get really upset with when people were just mean and nasty for what I felt like was no reason. And then I would hear stories of, oh, that person's just been through really tough things. And in my mind, I think I would always say, well, I've been through some pretty tough things too, and you don't see me walking around treating people like garbage. And it used to really bother me. But then I learned that essentially, if you're walking around with your chip on your shoulder, not only have the things that you've been through been really hard, but your mindset and how you're working through those things is really hard for you. And ultimately, I feel for you because it must be so, so difficult to be stuck in that kind of mindset. And I guess that's really what it comes down to, is having some compassion. I'm very big on compassion, self-compassion included. So these are some of the things that I was thinking about, and I thought to kind of put it out there for you guys to reflect on. Because again, we all have things that we carry, things that we're resentful about, things that we're angry about. But it's ultimately how we choose to allow those things to show themselves in our lives that keeps us either hanging on to those things or helps us work through those things. So some of the questions that I think I started to pose already is, what chips do you carry? What chips do others around you carry? Because we've talked about on this show, and it's a little cliche, but I think there's a lot of truth to the phrase of, you are the sum of the people that you hang around with. And so if you're in an environment and the people around you are reactive or angry, you're either going to fall in line with that, or you're going to realize just how different you are from that. And it's important to reflect on these things, because life is so, so, so valuable. And we spend so much of our time either living in the past or worrying about the future. Two things which we have absolutely no control over. And what we do is we carry these things in the present. So thinking about these things is ultimately how we grow as human beings. And then the other questions are, how do you carry the chips on your shoulders if you have any? How do the people around you carry them? Are you reactive? Are they reactive? Do you shut down? Like myself, I tend to shut down and not want to engage when I'm triggered by somebody who has a very strong victim mindset, because I can't deal with it. I struggle to deal with it because I like to believe that even though sometimes I pity myself or I feel sorry for myself, I don't stay stuck in it. So I have a hard time. But I encourage you all to think about these questions and reflect on, what are you carrying? What does that look like? How is it presenting itself? And then maybe in the future, we can revisit how to work through some of these chips. with that being said, I leave you all with some food for thought. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.